So here we go, guys. This is section 2A, River Tides. This is actually our opening costume in the parade. That's me, I'm Katrina, and I am the carnival designer, and I'm going to be with you throughout this process. So I'm going to start you off with talking you through the dresses. So for the following, you're going to need your blue crushed velvet fabric, you're going to need a sewing machine, and you're going to need scissors and pins. So you can see my template is laid out there, and this is the one I made earlier, and it's a circle skirt, what we would refer to as a circle skirt. So it's basically a circle of fabric with a waistband attached. So my fabric has come on a roll. This is not the same fabric you're going to use. Yours would be probably folded up. I think Diane probably has it all nicely folded for you. So if you've got a lot of space, you can use the templated skirt and lay it out on your fabric. So it'd be just easy. So that's the first way that you could do this template. So you just lay that out and cut around it. Bearing in mind that it's going to be sewn, the edges would be sewn by the time you get it, so you'd have to cut it a little bigger than the template that you receive. So you can spread that out, cut around, and that's the easiest way to do it. So I'm also going to show you how to make your circle from your fabric as is. We're basically making these skirts or dresses as big as the fabric will allow us to make, essentially. So you're just going to want to you're basically going to want to make a square first. So you'll measure your depth of your fabric by the length of the fabric and cut that into a square. And from there, we will make our circle. So I have quite a small table here, so this is probably very true to life for anybody who will be working on these kind of skirts. You will be wrestling with fabric a little bit until you get into the swing of things. Certainly until you get the first one done, because you can cut all your fabrics at the same time, so you get all this kind of messy bit out of the way. So I am just making the depth and the length of the fabric, just bringing them together basically to measure. And if you have a measuring tape, you could easily do that. Measure the depth of your fabric and then measure it along. But this is just a way to do that if you don't have any measuring tape handy. So there we go, we've got that folded over. That is exactly a square. Technically a triangle because we've now folded it over. So just making sure there's no really bad creases getting in the way, and making sure that the edges are matching, just there. So that's fine. That will be your piece that you're going to cut into your square. So give this a chop along, as straight a line as you can. These dresses do not have to be super exact, to be honest. We're going to be putting a fibre rod into these, which stretches them out, and it kind of really forgives any kind of wonky design, really, to be honest. So that is your square turned into the triangle. And what I'm going to do now is fold this a second time. So you're going to make it into a smaller triangle. Just going to make sure the fabric is all matched up with the edges. And so this little bit here is actually going to be the center point of your skirt. And the point straight out from that center point, straight out from there, is going to be the width of your skirt. So you're going to make sure that your fabrics are pretty evenly located on top of each other there. So if you have a measuring tape, you could easily just measure this, essentially the radius. So you'd measure this radius and you'd put a little mark, and then you would just move your tape around and give yourself little marks all the way along, and then cut where you've put your little marks. Different fabrics like to work different ways as well, and you know, if they're going to move a lot, that's probably the best way to do it. Otherwise, you've got fabric that won't move, you can just do this. So you put your measuring tape around your pen and just slide it along. Now you don't need a measuring tape for that. You could use a piece of string. You could also use a piece of sellotape. to do the same job actually if you fold it over twice. So now we're going to cut that little line that we've just done, and you will end up with a circle like the one I'm just showing you there, very briefly. So chop that along, and when you get to your narrowest part of your fabric, which will be coming up to just now, you're going to make sure that you have all of your pieces of fabric in the scissors, that you've not left one behind. So a quick double check that you've not left anything behind, because you could be chopping away and the piece underneath won't be getting cut, so you just need to double check that. And then chop that all the way to the end. Now these pieces on the edges, this one and the other one, you're going to use them later on. You're going to use 2 on the dress and you're going to use 2 on the armbands, so we don't waste them. So now we need to cut our waist out. So there's the part that's folded over and there's just one piece of fabric there, and this one has 2. So that's 2 put together, that is the width of your waistband. So the longest side of your waistband would go there. I hope that makes sense. If you cut that the wrong way, it won't make any sense. So once you cut this out, you should end up with an oval shape that you've cut out to the middle. If you don't end up with an oval shape, then you've gone wrong. So there's the oval shape I'm talking about. So that's what you should be left with in the end. So once you open that up, you can see the waist shape is there now. So what we also need to do is put a little split into the back. So just make sure you're only cutting one of your fabrics. So you just need one long split at the back. This is basically to allow the skirt to be pulled up over hips and bums that would be wider than the waist, and so that we can tie it tightly. Because you're using crushed velvet, you won't need to hem that little split at the back, which is handy. So I'm just going to fold this up and put that to one side. Now we need to add a waistband onto our waist. And the waistband is basically going to be about 2 meters of your fabric. The depth of that waistband is not hugely important. So what you would do is probably measure that by what you've got left and see how many you can get out of the fabric that you're given. So once you've got that cut out, you find the middle point there, as I've just done. And you're going to match that to the middle point of the front of the skirt, which will be directly opposite that split that you put in. So I'm just making sure that I've gone right there. I'm going to pop a little pin there. You could also just use a little mark, pen mark or something. So that is your middle point of your skirt, and you're going to match that to the middle point of your waistband. I always start when sewing these from the center out in each direction. It just allows you to make sure that you don't end up with a long waistband to tie on one side and a short on the other. This just keeps you keeps you on track, really. And so you would face your crushed velvet to your crushed velvet, and you would sew in each direction, as I was saying. And by the time you get to the end, you'll have a good enough piece that we can tie in a bow at the back of the skirt. So you don't need to hem that back bit either, as I was saying. This little split, that's actually left raw. The next thing you're going to do is hem all the edge of your circle skirt. So I've left a mark on the template at the back there to say to leave that bit open, because that's for putting in your fibre rod later. So you're going to start there, roughly about 1 inch over. You don't really want to go any smaller than 1 inch because your fibre rod has to slide through, and that can be really tricky if you've gone really wonky on your sewing. So you're going to leave about 1 inch because you need a decent enough little channel to get that through. So you'd hem that all the way around. Now I'm going to show you what to do with your two of your pieces that were left over from your edges. So I'm going to take that waistband off. Now in your mind you will have this already attached to the skirt, so I'm just going to show you without that. So again, you're looking at the center of your waistband, popping a little pin in that, and you're going to take 2 of your ends, which are stuck together still because you've just cut off your So you're going to take these pieces, they might still be attached together, you'll chop them off. Those other two you're going to use later on. What you're left with is two long triangles that will become like a halter neck. So you're just going to cut those in half so that you've got two even pieces, and you're going to attach them to your waistband. You're going to overlap them as you attach them. So you would put your most slanted side on the inside, so you can see it's kind of like taking shape like a little top. So it's two straps essentially that overlap each other, and you're just going to pop them onto the waistband. So you would be best to pin these ones in place to make sure you don't go too wrong, because you're trying to attach two together at the same time. You could actually put them one at a time if you like, but I would put the two together. So what you're left with then would be like a little halter neck top. So bearing in mind that this would already be attached to your skirt. You could actually do this before you attach your waistband to your skirt if you prefer, or afterwards, so that's really up to you. And that will be your skirt actually complete. So next up we have the chest piece. Chest piece is going to be made from foam and sparkly fabric. Now what I'm showing you here is a white foam and a green sparkly fabric. That's not what you will be receiving. You'll be receiving a much nicer, really gorgeous blue sparkly fabric to put over your foam. And so what you'll do is get a template for the neck piece. As you can see on the right hand side, there's a cardboard template sitting there. You'll receive that template and you'll receive your fabric. So what you'll do is you'll cut out your foam template, you'll lay your fabric on top, and what you can see me doing there is popping a few pins into that. You can pin straight into the foam, which is really handy, especially when you're working with the sparkly fabric. It's kind of a mesh fabric, so it likes to move around quite a bit. So you would lay that down, being careful to not be too wasteful with your fabric, and then you would trim the outsides a little bigger than what you need to fit your template, to fit your foam actually. So that is just to give you an allowance in case you go wrong as you're putting this fabric down on your foam. As I said, this sparkly fabric, it likes to move around a wee bit, so chances of going wrong is always pretty high with this kind of fabric really. So there we have it all. You can stretch it all out, make sure that it's fitting really nicely, and stick your little pins in. You shouldn't go too wrong if you've got a few pins to stick into your neck piece. So there we have it. I'm just giving these a little stretch out to make sure that they're fine. And then we're going to put some glue on the outer edges of your design here. We don't do any gluing on the inside because it just gets too messy. So really you're just sticking to the outside, and be careful with this mesh fabric. It can let the glue through really easily, so it's very easy to get your fingers burned. So if you can use a little piece of foam or a pencil, or put some masking tape on your fingers, that'll give you the freedom to kind of push that fabric down into place and not get your glue gun burns while you're doing it. So at this point you should have your glue gun switched on. I have actually only just switched on my glue gun, so I'm going to have to wait a couple of minutes for that to heat up. In the meantime, I'm going to cut out some little pieces that are going to be attached to the back, so just making use of my time here. So at the bottom of your template, that's where you'd be attaching the straps that keep this neck piece on. And in order to keep those straps on, we're going to need two little pieces of foam to hold the strap in place. So just measure your foam. You should have little offcuts at this stage if you've cut your template out already, and they don't have to be any particular size, just two little lines of foam to cover over your straps. That's basically to keep that on so that nobody rips the straps off while they're doing rehearsals. So I'm still waiting for my glue gun to heat up. Got those put to one side. Those are an ideal size actually as well for using to dab down the fabric onto your foam to protect your fingers. And just a note as well, this centerpiece around the neck, you don't need to cut that out yet. If you cut that out, you'll have an absolute nightmare trying to get this fabric to sit in the way that you want it to do. So we're going to cut that out at the last part of gluing this down. So your glue gun, when it's ready, should, well, most glue guns will dribble a little bit once they're heated up properly. Just take care not to force the glue through if it's not ready, because you can break the little triggers quite easily if the glue is not melted enough to come out the end. So a little tip there. So just keep an eye out on your glue gun and see if there's glue already dribbling out the front. And then that should be pretty much ready to go. Glue guns do take about 5 minutes to heat up properly, so make sure you're a little ahead of yourself there, not like me waiting for ages. So this one is just about ready to go now. So all you're going to do is glue the outer edges of your foam. That's all you need to keep this fabric on, and you're making sure to spread that glue out nicely, and this will help reduce any possibility of getting a glue gun burn. Now my hands are used to it, so I just bat them down like really gently, so I'm not really sticking my fingers in the glue, I'm just kind of batting the fabric down. But I also have my glue really well spread out, so if you don't do that, then there'll be a lot more glue to come through, and that's when you'll get your glue gun burn. But as I said, you don't need to use your hands on this, you can just use a pencil, or actually I think a little piece of foam is probably the best thing to do. So we're only doing a little tiny piece at a time. You need to really just take your time when you're working with this kind of fabric, because as I said, it loves to move, so it's easy to get creases, and once you get creases, it's really hard to get them out. So a little bit at a time, removing the pins as we go, sticking to just the edges and spreading everything out really nicely. We have creases, so I'm going to fix them before you start gluing. Now you shouldn't be stretching your fabric as you're going around here. If you're stretching your fabric when you get to this part, you'll end up with fabric that doesn't match where you've started essentially, and you'll end up with a big crease. If you do end up with a big crease, just cut a line through it, cut your scissors straight through it, and just stick it down wherever it wants to lie. Really, it's the best way to do it. Just be careful where you've got your glue gun sitting when you're doing this. I'm well used to it now, but you'd want to put your glue gun away somewhere safe so you don't catch your hands in it while you're battening that down. Do as I say and not as I do, of course. So now you're going to do your inside neck. So this is where it's going to sit on the person's neck. So you're going to cut that again with a bit of excess. So you're not cutting it flush to the foam, so you've got a little bit of excess there. So now you're going to lift this fabric up to get in underneath it. And get a little bit of glue down there. And again, don't be stretching your fabric as you're doing this as much as you can. Just lift it up and let it fall down where it wants to fall down. Not too much glue needed for this bit actually. And just get all the way around. So that it's all done. So that's it glued down. So what you want to do now is trim off the outer edges of your fabric. You're just going to go flush with the edge of the foam for this. While you're doing this, you might just want to keep an eye on if you have little bits of fabric that are not glued down. This is when you'll notice it, because once you go to cut, you'll see the fabric coming away, and you'll need to give that another little glue before you continue cutting. Otherwise, if you're all glued down well, just chop away until you've got all the outer edges cut off. just trimming off that little bottom bit as well. Now we're going to look at doing the neck. So we're not going to trim this off, we're actually going to glue that down. So you're going to probably need your wee bit of foam for batting down this bit to keep your fingers safe. You're going to use very little glue to glue this down. And the reason we're not cutting this off is because sequins, once they're cut, can be quite sharp. And this is going to potentially be against somebody's neck, depending on how it sits on the body. So we just don't want to have something that's going to irritate the person's neck. So you're just going to fold those over, give them a little bit of glue and bat them down. There we go, we can just use that little bit of foam. It's perfect for this job. Now when you finish gluing this, if you run your hand along it and you think that it's too, that it could be too sore on somebody, then we'll need to look at putting a little rim of foam, an added little rim of foam over that fabric. So just judge that as you go. It depends on your gluing skills, essentially, really. So you can come back to me on that if you need some direction to put another little bit of foam in there to protect the person's neck. Otherwise, if it feels kind of okay, then that's perfect. So there we go, that's our neck piece. So now we need to put our straps on our neck piece. So the straps go onto the back. And we're going to use those two little pieces that we cut out earlier in the foam. So the straps are going to be a strip of crushed velvet to match the dress. So again, the size is going to be about 2 meters long, give or take, and the width of the straps doesn't really matter. So you can follow the little template there at the bottom, and you're just going to lay your fabric down, find the center point of it, and lay it down on what you think is roughly the center point of your neck piece. So lay that down, and then you're going to glue that in place. So lay it down first and then just lift it up to get your glue underneath it and spread that glue out really well. And you're going to need to push that down. So that should be glued on fairly well. Crushed velvet's quite good at taking glue, so we're just being extra protective here with our little extra pieces. But these just protect the straps so that they don't get pulled off during a rehearsal. So I'm just going to bop those down on top, making sure you're covering over the edges of your fabric, because that's the most important part. It's almost like making like a little bridge over our fabric to keep it in place. So once those are dry, that would be your neck piece actually complete. So they're not going to pull off if you've got that little bit of foam there. And that's it. Very simple. So next up we have our little fish headpiece. So here we go, you're going to need your template, you're going to need your foam, you're going to need your crushed velvet, and you're going to need your sequin fabric. Now again, I have shown you one here that is green. You've got a lovely blue for this, and you'll have a blue foam as well, hopefully. If not blue, then it'll be white. Depends what we can get ordered. So here we go, we have our little template. So just fit your template onto your foam, just in the most economical way, really. You want to think about waste, so if you could squeeze that into the edges, that'd be great. So just draw around your template, making sure that the pen that you're using is making a mark on your template as you're going. So just double check in there, yeah, that's making a mark. A ballpoint pen is actually probably the best thing to draw these out. And because we're giving you a thinner foam for the headpiece, you can actually just use the scissors to cut this, which is really handy. The thicker foam needs a blade, but you can blade this as well if you like, if you prefer to work that way. So what I would do, if you're doing a lot of these headpieces, you need to rough cut this little fish off your big sheet first. So you've got a big sheet and you've drawn these out, so just give this a rough cut so that you can work on the kind of the fiddliness of this in a smaller piece. So there we go, that was rough cut there. You can't really see my drawn lines, but I'm sure you can follow my scissor cutting. So just chop off all your little excess. Now there is also a little eye in the template, a little fish's eye. We're just going to ignore that. Definitely way too fiddly. So we're just going to forget about that a little bit. And there's your little fish has taken shape. So there we go, that is all chopped out. Let's get rid of all your excess. Now you're also going to need your little bit of foam again for battening down, definitely for battening down this one, because you want to make sure your sequin is stuck very, very well to this little shape. It's way more intricate than your neck piece. So again, you're going to try to be a little bit economical with your fabric. Squeeze that little fish into the edge of your design as much as possible. And once you know you've got him placed quite nicely, you're just going to rough cut that again, so that you can work on a smaller piece of your fabric. Making sure it all fits nicely. Now you could pin this down like you did with the neck piece, stick a few pins in it to stop the fabric from moving. I didn't bother, but that's entirely up to you. So you're going to start again with a very, very small little bits of your template at a time. So I'm just doing the tip of his tail here, actually his full little fins on his tail, and letting that just lie down on top again, not stretching the fabric, not telling it what to do, just laying it down so that it sticks nice and evenly, and then using your little bit of foam to bat that all down. Just make sure that's pretty dry before you move on, in case you go pulling it off again by accident. So now I'm going to continue up his little tail. Again, only sticking to the insides. Until I get to this middle bit, I actually do a line up his middle body here, and that's actually just to stop the fabric from moving around too much, really. And again, just make sure your edges are all covered over with your sequin fabric, and just bat that down. If you spread your glue out well enough, you shouldn't get any glue gun burns doing this. If you're finding that you're getting a glue gun burn, it's because you're not spreading your glue out enough, really. And that's the final bit of our little coverage there, our sequin coverage. It's definitely a little bit fiddly, this part, so I think you just need to take your time, really. So once you're sure that is completely stuck, completely dry, you could put this to one side and move on to another one. But once that is dry, you're going to trim off those edges. Again, if you're trimming off those edges, it's probably the right time to kind of have a look and see if you have any edges that didn't actually stick very well, that maybe dried in before you got the sequin down on top of it or whatever. That frequently happens with this kind of project, so just keep an eye out on that. Some tricky little parts here to cut, especially this little part of the tail inside, but still there's no real other way to do it. You can't use a blade for this part, because it's really, it'll just pull the fabric, so you better just to tell it who's boss and just get in there and get that chopped out. You could even rough cut that, cut a line up and rough cut it and then trim it all off afterwards. There we go, that should be nicely fixed. You might see some little bits, there's one there, bits that weren't stuck down. It's good to get those now. And again, just a quick double check. That's it. So the fish covered. So now we need to look at the headband. So again, it's going to be a blue crushed velvet, and we need a little piece at the back of our template to get our fish to stand up against this blue crushed velvet. So if you want to mark your little fish, you can. It's not really necessary, but it'd be handy to not go wrong on your first one anyway. And you're going to need a little piece to stand up against that velvet. It doesn't have to be any particular specific size. I've given you a rough size, so it doesn't really have to be super particular. And now it's going to stand out away from your little fish. So you're making like a little, almost like a little L shape. So just glue your little piece down as close to the edge as you can. And just take your time with this one, be patient and make sure this part is stuck on, because this is really what's going to keep your little fish's headpiece on the head and standing up against the glue crushed velvet. So here's the blue fabric. You're going to use your blue crushed velvet for this. The width of this again is only dependent on how much you have, how much fabric you've been given. So what we're going to do is put a little X in the middle. You can do this, or you don't really have to do this either. You're really just going to stick your little fish right in the middle of the center of your fabric. So once this is it's going to be completely dry now in order to do this. Shove his little tail out of the way. Give this plenty of glue. Make sure you're covering over the gap between the little piece you stuck on and the bottom of the fish. Just gives a bit of extra support, and you're just going to stick him as if he's going down the wee river there. So stick him right in the middle. You're going to hold that in place for a while. Just be careful here that the glue doesn't go through your crushed velvet and stick to the table. It's entirely possible. Just make sure you've got something underneath there that's it's not super precious. Piece of cardboard or piece of plastic, something like that. So here's a little one that I have finished already. So the next thing, we want to try to get this little tail sitting correctly. So what you're going to have to do is take your headpiece that you've now put together, try it on your own head. Okay, so if you don't mind, just pop that onto your head and see where that little tail is sitting. Get a pen ready, because you're going to make a little mark on your own head. Not on your head, but on the band itself. So it'll sit differently than it's sitting here. So you just want to push that into place somewhere that you think it looks nice. Okay, so my mannequin's head is actually quite small, so it already looks like it's sitting nice, but you need to sit it back a wee bit from the face. A little bit hanging over the face is fine, and you've got to put a little mark on that, and that will be where the center of your little tail is going to sit. So then take it off. Obviously, we don't want you putting the glue near your face. It's never advisable. So there's your wee mark. Pop a little bit of glue on that, just a little circle of glue, and then push your little tail, the center of your little tail, into place. Now it'll feel totally wrong because it's not on the mannequin's head. So for your first one, just try that out and make sure you're happy with the position that that's in. Once that dries off and you're sure that it's all cooled down, pop that back on your head again. You don't really need to tie it, but just pop it on your head and see that it's worked. So here it is on my mannequin's head there. It's worked just fine. It's sitting in exactly the place that I wanted to sit, and that's perfect. So that's your little headpiece. So now we're going to make the armband. So we're going to go back to those corner pieces of your crushed velvet that you cut off your skirt at the beginning. Now if you didn't make the skirt, these will be provided to you by the time the skirts are already done. So we're going to use these corner pieces to make our armbands. So you'll get a little template that I'm showing you here. You're going to place that down on these corner pieces, and you're going to cut that out, and you'll cut two at the same time. Well, you don't have to, but more than likely it's going to be sitting on top of each other, so you can cut the two at the same time. You'll also receive one long strip of these kind of fringes that I've already made for you. You are going to cut that fringe into 4 smaller pieces. Okay, so I'm just going to fold that to be about that size. You'll have 4 of them. I have cut my 4 here already. So I'm going to put that one to one side. Here is our 4 pieces. So the 4 pieces, you're going to put one on each side of this armband, and you're just going to sew that along. Or if you've got glue, you can glue that along. And you're going to put it on the widest end of this. This narrow bit at the front goes over your hand, so that actually doesn't need any fringe put on it. Okay, so your 4 pieces will do your 2 armbands.